be. How you guys doing? Welcome to the 3D Cookup Show. In the last episode, we actually created the intro that you just saw for this series. So if you haven't seen it already, check that out. Today, we're going to get to our actual first task. We're going to create an animation for the brand I'm pulling up at the moment, which is called NeverFollowOrders. Make sure to follow the Instagram page. So now the question, what is the golden magnum opus of every creative agency? The show reel. In this case, I picked out all of my portfolio pieces from the past years. What did I do? I picked a song, I slapped it all together in Premiere, and what do we got? An unfinished show reel. So what are we missing? Well, a nice looking intro and outro animation for the reel. Artem, what do you think of this idea?
That light behind me is actually behind me, but if I look at the shadow, it is.
Thank you, Artem. First step, let's get some reference material. Two holes. So let's jump on Behance and Pinterest and see if we can find some cool stuff. Well, that actually went fairly quickly. This time I actually found the best material just on Google Images. I also checked out the website ArtStation, which a friend of mine actually recommended to me a few days ago. For the general look of the landscape, I actually want to go in kind of an anime direction. Me, myself, I actually never really watched an anime series, but every time I see an image or a little clip from an anime, and they show these big fields, and it's sunny, and it just seems like a very happy, colorful place, that exact feeling I want to recreate in 3D. Also got a few reference images from inside of a train looking out the window. That will just help me build the interior of the train as well as get the perspective right. And I thought of putting one of these old windmills as the center object of the landscape in the background. So as we actually don't need a storyboard for this animation because there's just going to be one scene and it's not going to be very long, we can instantly jump into Blender and start creating some stuff. So let's do that. Well guys, I am officially done cooking.
Where's the lamb sauce?
So, what did I do? This project really isn't that difficult to recreate, so let me walk you through the steps. Well, first off, I started creating the main part of the train. As we're only going to have a small angle which is looking outside of a window, I didn't have to create a whole train, of course, so I just created a small section with 3 or 4 cutouts for the windows. I just cut those out with a simple Boolean modifier and a square with rounded off edges that I arrayed. I also added some rims for the windows so it looked a bit more realistic, and afterwards I proceeded to model the table as well as the benches. To give the whole train interior kind of a vintage look, I added some screw nuts around the windows. Then I also added some window plates and gave them a glass material. I also started spreading some materials around the scene. I have a few material plugins that I always use in Blender. I'm going to put them up on screen for you guys, so if you're interested, check them out. Then I went on and added some metal poles as well as some borders for the windows. I also added a small window divider so it looks like you can actually open the window up. Then I went on to tackle the landscape. The landscape was pretty easy. I just used the landscape creation tool that you can actually enable in the Blender preferences panel. I chose this preset and afterwards added an array modifier to array the whole thing. I slapped a quick grass texture on there, but then I realized, okay, I still need a background. So I went to Dream Studio, which is a very simple AI creation website, and created a quick background for the whole scene. Imported this with the import images as planes function and put it in the background. Then I used the Botanic add-on, which has a really great nature asset library. This is definitely my go-to for any creation of trees, grass, or any kind of stuff that could be grown in your scene. So I used this to put some grass as well as some trees and some flowers on there. The landscape was still a bit too simple for my liking, so I added a quick displace modifier and made it a little bit more bumpy. Even though it doesn't give the most realistic results, I always add some extra lighting here and there just to give emphasis on certain parts of my scene. In this case, I used a big spotlight and put it right in front of the window which shines onto the ground. Just makes the grass pop a little bit more. As I had the train fully modeled, I parented everything to a separate null object. I keyframed the null object to be moving, so the train was obviously moving, but what was bothering me is if a train moves, you always have a slight wiggle effect, right? Because the movement of a train is obviously never 100% stable. So to get a slight up and down movement going for the whole train, I used the wiggle effect. which you can add to any property in the graph editor. As soon as I added that, you can see that the whole train is slightly moving and shifting, which adds a lot of realism to the whole thing. At this point, I made my first frame render and put it into After Effects, put some color grading on there, and just played around with the colors. I instantly realized I wasn't really liking how the borders of the windows looked, so I quickly went in there and made some new ones. As the scene was starting to look fuller and fuller, I actually started creating the teacup and I slapped the NFO branding on there. After a second quick frame render, I actually started playing around with the camera movement. I decided to go with a very slow zoom in.
How original.
I also added a little tea bag hanging out of the cup with a little tea bag tag at the end, which of course also needed the NFO logo on it. Then I realized my plan of putting a windmill in there was really easy, just a few squares, stretch them out, bevel the edges. I realized one wasn't really enough for the scene, so I duplicated the windmill 2 times and put them at 2 different spots in the scene. This also added a lot more depth to the whole thing. As the table was still looking a bit empty, I decided to put a magazine on there, which I created out of a squashed rectangle. I duplicated the outside faces, put them on top, gave it a multi-resolution modifier, and sculpted some bent edges. Afterwards, I went into Illustrator and designed the cover art. I exported it as a PNG and put it on there as a texture. There was still one key ingredient missing. The munch. So what better munch on a train ride than a good old pretzel? I knew if I would try modeling this thing myself, I would horribly fail.
Behold, the pretzel nut!
So I went on the Turbo Squid and quickly got a cheap asset. Found a cool one, put it on the table, created some crumbs for it, and of course you don't just put food on a table, I made napkins. Just a subdivided plane, which I put a quick cloth simulation on there, let it fall down, converted it into a mesh, duplicated it once more, so we had 2, and sculpted them a bit to my liking. Then I made my first test render, so I actually rendered the animation out one time. As always, I used the Render Farm Concierge render, which is one of the best ones if you use the normal Cycles or Eevee render engine in Blender, in my opinion. It's very cheap, it's reliable, and it's very easy to use. I noticed a little texture bug on the window rims, which came from the window rims still being paths, which I beveled and extruded. So I converted them to mesh and that actually fixed the bug. I also noticed that the cup looked a bit too bright from the inside, because normally if you have dark liquid into something, it actually makes the inside look a bit shadowy. So I added some liquid in there, which was just a cylinder, and I put some liquid material on there, which I darkened down to make it look like black tea. I also wanted to let a little bit of steam come out of the cup, but I really can't be bothered to work with particle or volume animations in Blender. So as the scene was cartoony anyway, I went back to After Effects and created a quick steam animation, which I exported on transparent and then imported as an image plane into Blender. I decided that the intro shot should have 2 shots, one where you actually look outside of the window, and then another one which is kind of a close-up top-down shot onto the table, so you can actually see what's on the magazine, because the magazine has our campaign on it, taking your brand onto a journey. And that was basically it, guys. I rendered it again on the render farm, put it into After Effects, put some nice color grading on there, a slight vignette, and there we go, we have our showreel intro animation. And we're already done. This was a really fun animation, and it wasn't even that hard to do. The modeling of the train was fairly simple, the modeling of the landscape was very simple, and even the modeling of the windmills went really quickly. I really like how friendly and vibrant the whole animation got. It looks like a summer day, you sit in the train, you're munching on your mad pretzel, drinking the NFO tea. What else do you want? The full work time of this animation was 5.5 hours. That includes the intro animation as well as an outro animation, which I also created afterwards. I think it captures the whole theme of the NFO brand really well. It's modern, colorful, and very simplistic. This time I think I got really close to all of my reference images. I think after every project you finish, you should take a close look at your reference material and see if you actually followed the path that you were planning in the beginning. For example, in the last episode when creating the intro, I went completely off path. This isn't always a negative thing, but especially if you're in the middle of working on your project and you're not really sure about the whole look, take a quick look at your reference material and see if you're even following the plan that you had in the beginning. Because most of the time you start drifting off at some point. Like I said, this can be a really good thing, so if you find new stuff that you want to try out, definitely do it. But if you're struggling with finding the right look of your project, definitely get back to your reference material. So the most important question, what could you charge for an animation like this? What the hell? What you always have to keep in mind with 3D animations is that the runtime of the animation doesn't even matter that much, especially if you use a render farm. What's more important is how detailed is the scene or the object that you have to create. For example, if the animation only has a runtime of 2 seconds, but you have to model a very detailed photorealistic landscape, this will take you hours just to create the whole scene. Of course, the render time will be way less, but it takes you so long to create the scene in the first place. And the opposite example is, let's say you have to create an animation that has a 30-second runtime, but it's only a plain background and a very simple object. You'll be done way quicker than in the first example. So the intro animation as well as the outro animation together have a runtime of about 10 to 15 seconds. So really not that long. Still, I would say the low end you could charge for something like this is around 700 bucks. The high end, or in my opinion more reasonable price, would be around 2,000 bucks. If you work with a very small company or a startup, they of course will have way less budget in comparison to working with a big agency or a big brand. So that's why there's always a big gap between the low end, the average price, and the high end you could charge for something. So that was the second episode of the 3D Cookup Show. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, leave a like, subscribe, and feel free to check out my Instagram accounts. Again, as I'm just starting this channel, please leave some feedback in the comments as you did last time. It really helps a lot, so feel free to leave some stuff down below. Alright boys, that's it from me. Stay creative, sit down and create some cool portfolio pieces, and I'll see you in the next episode. Alright.